A cowboy stood before the entire town and spoke 4 quiet words to the one woman everyone else had already dismissed. But what made him choose her? The church bell rang once. A cold Wyoming wind swept dust across the street as dozens of townsfolk stood frozen in place. Near the front steps, a limping woman tightened her grip on a worn travel bag. A horse snorted. Leather creaked. Then the cowboy stepped forward, ignoring every stare around him. His eyes never left hers, and just before anyone could stop him, he said something that made the crowd fall silent. What happened before that moment was a story nobody saw coming. If stories of courage, love, and second chances speak to you, stay with us and share where you're watching from. The first snow of the season had not arrived yet, but winter was already sitting on the shoulders of Redstone Ridge. A cold wind rolled down from the Windstone Mountains, carrying dust across the main street and rattling the wooden signs above the storefronts. Men gathered near the freight station before sunrise. Ranch owners, foremen, cowboys looking for extra hands. Every fall it was the same. People came hoping to find work before winter closed the roads. Some arrived with strong horses. Some arrived with references folded inside coat pockets. Others arrived with nothing. Delilah Brooks stood alone near the edge of the platform. A faded canvas bag rested beside her boots. The right heel of one boot was worn down unevenly. When she shifted her weight, a slight limp followed every step. She kept her chin lifted anyway. The station clock showed a few minutes past 8. One by one, ranch owners looked over the waiting workers. Questions were asked. Hands were shaken. Names were written into small ledgers. People were chosen. People were sent away. A broad-shouldered rancher named Vernon Pike stopped in front of Delilah. He looked at her bag, then at her shoes, then at the way she stood. "You worked before?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "What kind of work?" "Cooking, cleaning, bookkeeping, laundry?" The man glanced toward her leg. His expression changed. "We already filled the position." He walked away before she could answer. Delilah lowered her eyes for only a second. Then she straightened again. The morning dragged on. Another ranch owner stopped. Another question. Another glance, another refusal. By noon, the crowd had become thinner. Most workers were already leaving town with their new employers. A wagon loaded with supplies rolled past. The smell of coffee drifted from the diner across the street. Somewhere nearby, a blacksmith hammered iron. The sound echoed through town. Delilah remained where she was. The cold seemed sharper now. An older woman carrying groceries paused beside her. "You should try Casper," she said quietly. "There might be work there." Delilah forced a small smile. "Thank you." The woman nodded and continued down the street. Both of them knew Casper was nearly 2 days away, and Delilah barely had enough money for supper. She reached into her coat pocket. 2 coins. A folded receipt. Nothing else, that was all. A group of cowboys passed by, laughing. One of them glanced toward her. Not cruelly, not kindly. Just the look people gave someone they had already decided could not help them. By early afternoon, only a few ranch owners remained. The clouds overhead had turned gray. A gust of wind swept across the station yard. Delilah tightened her coat around herself. For the first time all day, uncertainty reached her face. Not fear, not anger, just exhaustion. She had spent years moving from town to town. Temporary jobs, temporary rooms, temporary promises, always one bad season away from starting over. And now another winter was coming. A horse snorted nearby. She looked up. A dark wagon had stopped near the station. The driver climbed down slowly. Tall, broad shoulders, weathered hat, dark coat dusted with road dirt. The conversations around the station seemed to soften when he appeared. People noticed him. Not because he demanded attention, because he never did. Cole Mercer, owner of Broken Mesa Ranch. Delilah recognized the name. Almost everyone in Wyoming did. Cole walked across the yard carrying a folded supply list. He wasn't looking for workers. At least that was what everyone assumed. His ranch already had a reputation for running smoothly. He stopped a few feet from Delilah. For a moment, neither spoke. The wind tugged at the brim of his hat. His eyes moved briefly toward her worn travel bag, then back to her face. Not once did he look at her leg. Not once. "You know how to cook?" he asked. Delilah blinked. After a day full of questions, it seemed strangely simple. "Yes." "You cook for large crews?" "Yes." "Bake?" "Yes." A pause. Cole nodded once. "Get in the wagon." For a second, she thought she had misunderstood. "What?" "I said get in the wagon." The words were calm, matter-of-fact, as if the decision had already been made. Around them, several people stopped talking. A few heads turned. Delilah stared at him. "You haven't asked anything else." Cole shrugged lightly. "If you can cook, that's enough." The silence stretched. Then he stepped aside and opened the wagon door. Delilah looked around. No one spoke. No one laughed. No one offered an explanation. The station yard suddenly felt very still. Slowly, she picked up her canvas bag. The handle creaked from age. She climbed into the wagon. Cole returned to the driver's seat. A moment later, the horses started forward. The wheels rolled across frozen dirt. Redstone Ridge began to fall behind them. Delilah looked through the small rear window. The station grew smaller. The storefronts disappeared one by one. The church steeple faded into the gray afternoon sky. For the first time all day, she allowed herself to breathe. Not relief. Not yet. Just a small breath. A beginning. Beside her sat a crate of coffee beans, 2 sacks of flour, and a ledger book tied with string. Ordinary things. But somehow they felt heavier than gold. Because they were headed somewhere. Because, for the first time in a long while, someone had said yes. Outside, the road curved toward the distant mountains. Cole guided the horses without speaking. The wagon rocked gently over frozen ruts. Miles passed. The town shrank behind them. Delilah rested her hand on her worn travel bag. She wondered what kind of ranch awaited her. She wondered why a man like Cole Mercer had chosen her when nobody else would. Neither question had an answer. Not yet. Back in Redstone Ridge, a man stood on the boardwalk outside the bank. He watched the wagon disappear into the distance. His expensive wool coat moved in the wind. His jaw tightened. His eyes followed the road long after the wagon vanished from sight. Then he turned and walked inside the bank without a word, as though something valuable had just slipped beyond his reach. The wagon rolled west for nearly 3 hours before Broken Mesa Ranch finally appeared. Delilah saw it first through a break in the hills. A long valley opened beneath the fading afternoon light. Snow dusted the distant peaks of the Windstone Mountains. A creek wound through yellow grass before disappearing behind cottonwood trees, stripped nearly bare by autumn. The ranch house stood on a low rise. Weathered wood, wide porch, smoke drifting from a stone chimney. Nothing grand, nothing flashy, just solid. The kind of place built to last through hard winters. Cole guided the horses through the front gate. The hinges groaned softly. Several ranch hands looked up from unloading hay. Most nodded respectfully toward Cole. Then their eyes shifted toward Delilah. She braced herself for questions, for curiosity, for judgment. None came. A gray-haired cowboy named Frank simply tipped his hat. "Evening, ma'am." Delilah blinked. "Evening." That was all. No one stared. No one whispered. The simple kindness felt almost unfamiliar. Cole carried her bag inside. The house smelled faintly of coffee, pine wood, and fresh bread. He showed her a small room on the first floor, a quilt folded neatly at the end of the bed, a wash basin near the window, a wooden chair beside a lamp. "You'll stay here," he said. Delilah looked around. "It's bigger than any room I've had in years." Cole nodded once. "The stove works. Water's pumped every morning. Supper's at 6. Then he left. No speech, no conditions, no reminder that she owed him anything. Only silence. That first evening, she joined the ranch hands for supper. Stew, cornbread, coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Conversation drifted around the table. Weather, cattle prices, a broken fence near the south pasture. Nobody treated her like an outsider. Nobody treated her like a burden. After supper, she washed dishes while lantern light flickered against the kitchen walls. When she finished, she noticed a stack of ledgers on a shelf, carefully organized, receipts tied with twine, supply records, feed invoices, everything in order. The next morning, Cole handed her a key. "Pantry." Delilah looked surprised. "You trust me with it already?" "If I didn't trust you, you wouldn't be here." He walked away before she could answer. Days turned into weeks. The rhythm of broken Mesa settled around her. Before sunrise, coffee brewed on the stove, breakfast for 12 men, inventory checks, flour counts, bean sacks, salted pork, kerosene deliveries, then bookkeeping in the afternoon. At night, she balanced figures beneath the glow of an oil lamp. For the first time in years, her life felt steady. One afternoon, an 11-year-old boy wandered into the kitchen carrying a stray puppy. His name was Owen Parker. Orphan, part-time stable helper, full-time troublemaker. The puppy immediately stole a biscuit and ran. Owen looked horrified. Delilah laughed before she could stop herself. The sound surprised both of them. From that day on, Owen appeared constantly, helping stack supplies, carrying water buckets, inventing excuses to visit the kitchen. The ranch slowly became something she had forgotten was possible, a place where people expected her tomorrow. One chilly evening, Delilah stepped onto the porch after supper. The moon hung low above the valley. She paused. Something looked different. The front steps, the side path, the narrow walkway beside the garden. She stared for several seconds before realizing what had changed. The uneven stones had been replaced. The path was wider, smoother, easier to walk, especially for someone who limped. The next morning, she noticed the same thing near the barn and beside the smokehouse. Small changes. Careful changes. Never mentioned. Never explained. Late that afternoon, she found Cole repairing a gate hinge. "You changed the paths." Cole kept working. "They needed fixing. They've needed fixing for years." The hammer stopped briefly, only briefly. Then he returned to work. "The ranch should work for everybody who lives here." Nothing more. Delilah stood there for a moment, then quietly walked away. Winter crept closer. The first freezing rain arrived one evening after dark. Wind rattled the windows. Most of the ranch hands gathered inside the bunkhouse playing cards. Delilah finished cleaning the kitchen and stepped outside to bring in a basket left near the porch. Voices drifted from the open bunkhouse window. She recognized Frank's voice. 7 years, someone whistled. "Hard to believe." Another man laughed softly. "I stopped counting after the third widow tried to marry him." More laughter. Frank shook his head. "Doesn't matter who asked. Cole always said no." "Maybe he's married to the ranch." "No, it's worse than that." A pause followed. Then Frank spoke more quietly. He loved his wife. Never looked at another woman after she passed. The room fell silent. Delilah stood frozen in the darkness. Rain tapped against the porch roof. She suddenly understood something. The distance. The quiet. The careful way Cole carried himself. Not coldness. Not indifference. Loss. A deep one. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Frost covered the pasture. Owen raced toward the house carrying the mailbag. "Morning delivery!" He burst through the kitchen door. Several letters landed on the table. Feed invoices. A catalog. A bank notice. Then one plain envelope. No return address. Only Cole's name written across the front. Cole opened it while drinking coffee. His expression didn't change, but the cup stopped halfway to his mouth. Delilah noticed. So did Frank. "What is it?" Frank asked. Cole folded the paper. Nothing in his face moved, yet something in the room shifted. A faint tension, like distant thunder. He placed the letter into his coat pocket, then stood. "I'll handle it." That was all he said. But long after he left the kitchen, Delilah could not stop thinking about the look in his eyes. Because for the first time since arriving at Broken Mesa Ranch, she had seen something stronger than silence. Concern. And somewhere beyond the frosted windows, someone had decided she did not belong there. The letter remained in Cole's coat pocket for 3 days. He never mentioned it. No one asked. Life at Broken Mesa Ranch continued as it always had. Before dawn, lanterns glowed in the kitchen. Coffee simmered on the stove. Horses stamped their hooves against the cold. The valley settled deeper into winter. Yet something had changed. The feeling arrived quietly, like a draft beneath a closed door. Delilah noticed it first when Frank came into the kitchen one morning carrying a broken padlock. He set it on the table beside her ledger book. "Found this at the North Horse Barn." Delilah looked up. "The lock broke?" Frank shook his head. "Somebody cut it." The old cowboy glanced toward the window. Then he picked up the lock and walked away. Nothing else was said. That evening, 2 horses wandered into the south pasture after someone left a gate open. A week later, a section of fence near Willow Creek was found cut clean through, not broken. Cut. The ranch hands spent half a day repairing it. Cole rode the property lines himself. The snow had begun falling regularly now. Thin white layers covered the hills each morning. Tracks disappeared quickly. Evidence vanished. Questions remained. Then 3 head of cattle disappeared. The entire ranch felt the loss. Not because of the number, because it was impossible to ignore the pattern anymore. Something was wrong. One afternoon, Delilah carried inventory records into town. The mercantile smelled of lamp oil and flour sacks. She handed receipts to the owner. While waiting for change, she noticed 2 women speaking quietly near the fabric counter. Their voices dropped when they saw her. One woman looked away. The other didn't. "I heard she arrived right before the trouble started." The words floated through the store. Not loud, not whispered. Just enough. Delilah stood still. The merchant pretended not to hear. A few moments later, she left with her supplies and climbed into the wagon. Outside, snow drifted across Main Street. Inside her chest, something heavier settled. By the time she returned to the ranch, Owen was waiting near the gate. "Did you bring peppermints?" She smiled despite herself. "Maybe." The boy grinned. For a little while, the rumors stayed outside the ranch fences, but not for long. The next Saturday, Cole attended a livestock auction in Redstone Ridge. Delilah accompanied him to help with accounts. The sale barn buzzed with voices. Cowboys, traders, bankers, ranch owners. As they moved through the crowd, conversations paused. Not openly, not dramatically, just enough to notice. Near the auction ring stood Harlan Crow, tall, expensive coat, silver watch chain across his vest, the same man who had watched the wagon leave town weeks earlier. His smile never reached his eyes. Mercer. Cole nodded. Crow. Harlan glanced toward Delilah. Looks like you've brought yourself new help. Cole's expression remained unchanged. She's part of the ranch. For a brief moment, something flickered across Harlan's face. Annoyance. Maybe disappointment. Then it vanished. Hope she works out better than your last investment. The words sounded harmless, but they landed differently. Cole turned away without responding. Harlan's smile widened. Delilah noticed, and she remembered it. The attacks became bolder after that. A feed shed door left open during a storm. Tools moved from their usual places. False stories spreading through town. Each problem somehow circled back toward her. Each rumor carried the same question. What if Delilah Brooks was responsible? One evening, Frank entered the kitchen with snow on his shoulders. He placed a folded newspaper on the table. A story had been marked in pencil. The article described thefts at nearby ranches. Someone had written a single sentence across the margin. Look closer at the woman. Delilah stared at the words. Frank quietly folded the paper shut. I don't believe any of it. She nodded. Neither spoke for several seconds. Outside, wind pushed against the windows. Inside, the stove crackled softly. The silence felt kinder than sympathy. That night, Cole found her sitting alone on the porch. The valley below lay buried beneath moonlit snow. You should be inside, he said. So should you. A faint smile touched his face, only for a moment. Delilah looked out toward the mountains. People are starting to believe those stories. Cole leaned against a porch post. No. Some do. No, he repeated. His voice stayed calm, certain, the kind of certainty that left no room for argument. Delilah lowered her eyes. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why don't you? Cole stared toward the dark pasture. Because he trusted what he saw. Because every ledger balanced. Because every worker respected her. Because she had brought life back into rooms that had been silent for years. But he said none of those things. Instead, he answered simply, because they're wrong. The wind carried the words away, yet somehow they stayed. A few days later, the first major snowstorm arrived. The sky darkened before noon. Snow blew sideways across the valley. Visibility vanished. Frank ordered everyone indoors. The horses were secured. Barn doors reinforced. Lanterns lit early. By evening, the storm roared across the mountains like a living thing. Inside the ranch house, Delilah helped prepare supper. Afterward, she stepped outside briefly to secure laundry left beneath the porch roof. Just for a moment. Just long enough. Hours later, Owen noticed something first. Where's Miss Delilah? No one answered. The kitchen stood empty. Her coat was gone. So were her gloves. Cole searched every room, every barn, every shed. Nothing. Then one of the ranch hands returned from checking the lower pasture. Snow covered his shoulders. His face had gone pale. We found her horse. The room froze. Where? Near Raven's Cut. A narrow canyon several miles north. Dangerous even in good weather. Deadly in a storm. Without hesitation, Cole reached for his coat. Frank stepped forward. You can't see 10 feet out there. Cole grabbed a lantern, then another. I don't care. The old cowboy looked at him. Really looked at him. and understood something. Neither man spoke of it. A few minutes later, Cole rode into the blizzard alone. The storm swallowed horse and rider almost immediately. Hour after hour he searched. Snow, darkness, wind, nothing else. Until near midnight he spotted movement among the rocks. A trapped horse, a torn blanket. Then Delilah, cold, shaken, alive. She had slipped while trying to return from checking on a stranded calf near the canyon edge. Cole helped her to shelter beneath an overhang of stone. For several minutes neither spoke. Only the howl of wind filled the darkness. Then Delilah stared into the storm. Her voice came quietly. "There was never an accident." Cole looked at her. "What?" "The wagon years ago." Snow swirled beyond the rocks. Delilah's hands tightened around the blanket. "The crash that damaged my leg." She swallowed. "Someone caused it." A long silence followed. Then she met his eyes. "Someone tried to kill me." The wind howled across the canyon. Snow swept past the narrow opening of the rock shelter. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Cole sat beside the small lantern he had carried into the storm. Its flame flickered with every gust that slipped inside. Delilah stared into the darkness beyond the rocks. "I never told anyone," she said quietly. Cole waited. Years of ranch life had taught him something important. People told the truth when they were ready, not before. "My father worked for a freight company near Cheyenne." Her voice remained steady. "He passed when I was 22. After that, I took a bookkeeping job with the same company." Snow rattled against the stone. "I handled invoices, delivery records, livestock manifests." She pulled her coat tighter. "One day I noticed numbers that didn't match." Cole listened. The same cattle were being recorded twice. Some shipments existed on paper but never arrived anywhere. She paused. "I thought it was a mistake. But it wasn't." "No." The lantern crackled softly. Delilah lowered her gaze. "I started copying records. Names, dates, payment receipts." Her fingers tightened around the blanket. "Someone found out." The silence stretched. 3 days later, my wagon lost a wheel on a mountain road. Cole understood immediately. It wasn't an accident. No. The word barely escaped her lips. When I woke up, my leg was broken. The records were gone. Outside, the storm continued to rage. Inside, something else settled between them. Understanding. Not pity, not sympathy. Understanding. When dawn finally arrived, the storm had weakened enough for them to ride home. Broken Mesa Ranch appeared through drifting snow late that morning. Owen nearly tackled Delilah when she climbed down from her horse. "You scared everybody." She smiled and rested a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry." The boy nodded fiercely, then pretended he had not been worried. For several days afterward, the ranch returned to its routine, at least on the surface. But Delilah noticed changes. Cole spent more time studying old newspapers, more time reading county records, more time asking questions in town. One evening, she found him reviewing property maps at the dining table. "You think the people from my past are connected to this?" Cole folded the map. "I think too many strange things started happening after you arrived." "That's not proof." "No." His eyes met hers. "But it's enough for me to keep looking." Something warm moved through her chest. Not because he had answers, because he had stayed. Weeks passed. Winter tightened its grip around Redstone Ridge. Then the bank notice arrived. A second one. And a third. The cattle losses had hurt the ranch. So had the damaged fences. Several contracts were delayed. Suppliers wanted payment. The bank wanted reassurance. Meanwhile, 2 ranch hands quietly accepted work elsewhere. Not because they distrusted Delilah, because uncertainty frightened people. The valley began talking again. Rumors spread faster than snow. By February, everyone knew a town meeting had been scheduled. Attendance was expected. The church hall filled quickly that evening. Oil lamps glowed against wooden walls. Ranchers sat beside merchants. Farmers stood near the rear doors. Even the banker attended. Harlan Crow stood near the front, perfectly dressed, perfectly confident. Delilah sat quietly beside Frank. Cole stood near the wall. The meeting began with discussions about cattle losses across the county. Then Harlan finally stood. The room quieted immediately. I believe we all know when these problems started. Several heads turned. Delilah felt it instantly, the shift in the room. Harlan continued. Maybe Broken Mesa would recover if certain influences were removed. Nobody said her name. Nobody had to. The implication hung in the air. The banker cleared his throat. A ranch owner looked down at his boots. No one wanted to speak first. Harlan smiled. Sometimes difficult decisions must be made for the good of the community. The silence became unbearable. Delilah slowly rose from her chair. Perhaps leaving would make things easier. Perhaps that was what everyone expected. But before she could take a single step, another chair scraped across the floor. Cole Mercer stood. The sound echoed through the church hall. Every eye followed him. He walked calmly across the room, not toward Harlan, toward Delilah. Then he stopped beside her, close enough that nobody could mistake his choice. Harlan's smile faded. The room held its breath. Cole looked around at the crowd, at neighbors, friends, people he had known for years. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, the same voice he used discussing weather or cattle prices, yet somehow it carried through the entire hall. The person who should leave isn't her. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the stove in the corner seemed quieter. Harlan's jaw tightened. Cole continued. She's done more good for Broken Mesa than most people in this room. The words landed harder because he rarely offered praise, and everyone knew it. For several long seconds, nobody challenged him. Then Harlan turned away first. The meeting ended shortly afterward. People filed out into the cold night. Whispers followed. Questions followed. But something else followed too. Respect. The kind that could not be forced. Later that night, snow drifted softly outside the ranch house. The kitchen stood empty. The lamps were dark. A single letter rested on the table beside the coffee pot. Cole found it just before dawn. His eyes stopped on the familiar handwriting, and suddenly the house felt far too quiet. Delilah Brooks was gone. The letter lay beside the coffee pot, folded neatly. Her handwriting was careful, just as it always was when she recorded supply orders or balanced ranch accounts. Cole opened it. The words were short. She thanked him for everything. For the room, for the work, for treating her with dignity when nobody else had. Then came the line that made him read the page twice. If I stay, they'll keep using me to hurt you. The letter ended there. No destination, no promise, no goodbye. Outside, dawn was only beginning to color the eastern ridge. Cole folded the paper and slipped it into his coat pocket. 10 minutes later, he was saddling his horse. Owen came running from the bunkhouse, still pulling on his boots. Where are you going? Cole tightened the saddle strap. To bring someone home. The boy stopped asking questions. By sunrise, Cole was following wagon tracks heading south along the frozen creek road. The tracks were fresh. Delilah had left before first light. The trail wound through cottonwoods and narrow valleys dusted with late winter snow. Around noon, he found her. She was resting beside a small trading post near Miller's Crossing. Her carpetbag sat beside a bench. When she saw him ride into the yard, she lowered her eyes. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Cole climbed down from his horse. "You left." "I had to." "No." His voice remained calm. "You decided you had to." A cold breeze moved across the porch. Delilah looked toward the distant mountains. "They won't stop." "Maybe." "They'll keep coming after your ranch." "Maybe." She finally looked at him. "Then why are you here?" Cole hesitated. For a man who rarely struggled for words, the silence lasted longer than expected. "Because Broken Mesa isn't the same place without you." The wind rattled a loose sign hanging above the store. Delilah blinked. Neither of them noticed the storekeeper quietly stepping back inside. Some moments deserved privacy. Before either could continue, another rider appeared on the road. A government-issued horse, dark coat, federal saddlebags. The man introduced himself before reaching them. Benjamin Holt. He removed his gloves. "Federal investigator." Cole frowned. "What do you want?" "Actually," Holt replied, looking toward Delilah, "I've been looking for her." The next several hours changed everything. Inside the trading post office, Benjamin spread documents across a wooden desk. Shipping manifests, payment ledgers, signed freight contracts, old witness statements. The papers stretched back nearly 8 years. Harlan Crow's name appeared again and again. So did the names Delilah remembered from the freight company. Benjamin adjusted his spectacles. "We've been investigating livestock fraud across 3 territories." He tapped one document. Several witnesses disappeared. Another paper. Records vanished. Another. Accidents happened. Delilah stared at the signatures. One of them belonged to the supervisor who had handled her case years earlier. Benjamin looked at her carefully. "You weren't imagining any of it." For the first time in years, someone official had finally said the words aloud. 3 days later, Redstone Ridge filled with people. The hearing was held inside the county courthouse. Ranchers arrived from neighboring valleys. Merchants crowded the back rows. Even those who once repeated rumors about Delilah showed up. Harlan Crow entered with his usual confidence. That confidence lasted less than an hour. Benjamin Holt presented document after document. Witness after witness, bank transfers. Fraudulent cattle shipments. False invoices. Hidden partnerships. Then came testimony connecting Harlan's associates to the sabotage of Delilah's wagon years before. The room became silent. Not dramatic silence. The heavier kind. The kind that settles when people realize the truth has been standing in front of them all along. Harlan stopped smiling. By late afternoon, federal deputies escorted him from the courthouse. Nobody cheered. Nobody celebrated. They simply watched. Because some victories felt too serious for applause. Outside, townspeople slowly drifted away. A few offered Delilah quiet apologies. Others simply nodded. Many could not meet her eyes. She accepted none of it with bitterness, and none of it with triumph. The truth was enough. Winter finally loosened its grip. Snow melted from the hillsides. Grass returned to the valley. Streams ran full again. Several weeks later, Redstone Ridge gathered for the annual spring festival. Children raced through the churchyard. Musicians played near the wooden gazebo. Fresh pies cooled on long tables covered with white cloth. Delilah stood near the church steps speaking with Owen. She wore a simple blue dress. Nothing fancy. Nothing expensive. Yet she seemed more at peace than she had ever been. Then the church bell rang. Several people turned. Cole Mercer was crossing the square. Slowly. Deliberately. The crowd sensed something unusual and gradually grew quiet. Delilah watched him approach. Her heartbeat quickened. Cole stopped directly in front of her. For a moment he simply looked at her. The same way he had that first day in town. Not at her injured leg, not at her past. At her. Only her. The spring wind moved gently through the valley. Finally he spoke. The day I met you, everybody else saw a woman with a limp. The square became completely silent. I saw the strongest woman I'd ever met. Delilah's eyes shimmered. Cole reached into his coat. He removed a small silver ring. Simple, handmade, honest, just like him. Then, before the entire town, he lowered himself onto one knee. A collective breath swept through the crowd. Cole looked up at her. His voice never wavered. You belong with me. Tears never came, not because she felt nothing, because some emotions were too deep for tears. Slowly, Delilah extended her hand. Cole slipped the ring onto her finger. The church bell rang again. This time nobody remained silent. Applause spread through the square. Owen cheered loudest of all. Months later, people would still talk about that afternoon. Not because a rancher proposed, not because a criminal had fallen, but because everyone remembered what happened when a man chose someone the world had overlooked. That evening, as the sun settled behind the Wyoming mountains, Cole and Delilah rode side by side toward Broken Mesa Ranch. The valley glowed gold beneath the fading light. The ranch house waited in the distance, its porch, its kitchen, its familiar gate. Home. For years, Delilah had lived as if she were always one town away from being unwanted again. Now the road ahead felt different. Not because life would be easy, not because troubles would never come, but because for the first time in a very long while, she no longer felt like someone left behind. And beside her rode the man who had seen her worth long before anyone else did. Together they disappeared into the spring sunlight, carrying with them something far more valuable than justice. They carried belonging. And maybe that's the part of this story that lingers long after the dust settles, because if you place yourself where Delilah once stood, alone in a crowded town, judged before anyone knew your heart, you realize how much a single act of kindness can matter. Not grand gestures, not speeches. Just one person willing to look past the scars and see the human being underneath. And if you imagine yourself in Cole's boots, perhaps you understand something too. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with thunder or certainty. Sometimes it arrives quietly. It sits across the kitchen table. It helps with the books. It stays when leaving would be easier. What makes this story memorable isn't the arrest, the hearing, or the public proposal. It's the reminder that healing often begins the moment someone feels seen, truly seen. Most of us carry parts of our past that we wish had turned out differently. Old wounds, old mistakes, old losses. Yet now and then, life places a person in our path who helps us believe that our story is not finished. I'd love to know your thoughts. Which moment in Cole and Delilah's journey stayed with you the most? And if stories like this bring you a little hope, a little comfort, or simply a quiet place to rest at the end of the day, I hope you'll join us again. There are many more journeys waiting beyond the next trail. Stories of courage, healing, second chances, and the kind of love that finds its way home when you least expect it.